What would you do if the person you loved most, your own son, decided you were a burden and tried to erase you, only for you to return literally next door? You won't believe what happened. I'm Dorothy, and I'm here to tell you a story, my story, that starts with a faint in my kitchen and ends with a betrayal so deep it makes you question everything you thought you knew about family. But it's also a story of resilience, of finding your voice when others try to silence it, and of reclaiming your life, brick by brick. I ask you again, what would you do if the person you loved most, your own son, decided you were a burden and tried to erase you, only for you to return literally next door? That's not a hypothetical question for me. It's my reality. The kind of reality that makes you feel like the ground has disappeared beneath your feet, leaving you suspended in a terrifying, lonely void. I promise you, by the end of this, your heart will ache, not just for me, but for anyone who has ever felt invisible, disposable, or utterly betrayed. It began on an ordinary Tuesday morning. If there ever truly is such a thing as an ordinary morning when your life is about to shatter. The sun was just starting to filter through the kitchen window, painting the familiar space with a false sense of peace. I was reaching for my favorite mug, the chipped one Dennis made me in pottery class when he was 7, a testament to a time when his hands crafted pottery for me, not forged documents. That's when it hit me. Not the mug, but a wave of dizziness so profound. It felt like the world had tipped on its axis. The room spun, the cheerful yellow walls blurring into an indistinguishable mess. My knees buckled, and the floor rushed up to meet me with a jarring thud. The next thing I remember was the frantic voice of Dennis, my son, and the cold tiles against my cheek. My head throbbed, a dull ache that resonated with a deeper, more profound pain that was just beginning to stir. I tried to sit up, but he gently pushed me back down. "Mom, just stay still," he said. But it wasn't the comforting tone of a worried son. It was clipped, impatient, like he was talking to a nuisance. He helped me to the couch, then stood there, hands on his hips, looking down at me. The way he looked at me, it wasn't concern. It was an assessment, a cold, clinical evaluation. My heart, still racing from the fall, started to sink with an unfamiliar dread. "You're too old, Mom," he finally said, his voice flat, devoid of any warmth. "Too slow. Too much of a burden." The words. Oh, those words. They weren't just spoken. They were flung at me like daggers, piercing not just my ears, but my very soul. A burden? Me. The woman who had given him life, who had stayed up countless nights nursing him through fevers, who had sacrificed her own dreams so he could chase his. The woman who loved him unconditionally? And now, after one small stumble, one moment of vulnerability, I was a burden? My breath hitched. I wanted to scream, to cry, to tell him how much those words hurt, but my throat felt tight, constricted by a sudden, overwhelming wave of grief. I tried to protest, to explain that it was just a dizzy spell, that I was fine, that I could manage, but he cut me off with a dismissive wave of his hand. "No, Mom. This is it. You can't live alone anymore. It's not safe." And just like that, with those few chilling words, my life, as I knew it, was ripped away. There was no discussion, no negotiation, no hint of compassion. The very next day, I found myself in a place I never thought I'd see from the inside. A nursing home. He moved me in, swift and decisive, as if I were a package to be delivered, not a living, breathing woman with a lifetime of memories and a fierce will to live. He even moved into my house, my sanctuary, as if I were already gone, already dead. What kind of son does that? What kind of heart turns so cold, so calculating? This wasn't just about a nursing home. It was about being erased, about being written out of my own life. And the biggest question that haunted me, the one that kept me awake in that sterile, unfamiliar room, was, how could he do this to me? How could the child I raised inflict such pain? And even more importantly, a cold, hard resolve starting to form in the pit of my stomach. What was I going to do about it? Because I knew, with every fiber of my being, that this could not, would not, be my ending. I wasn't confused. I wasn't senile. My mind was as sharp as ever, perhaps sharper now that it was fueled by a quiet, burning indignation. But I played along. I forced a weak smile when the nurses spoke to me in that overly patient, saccharine tone, as if I were a child. I nodded vaguely when they asked if I remembered my room number, pretending to be lost in a fog. I let them guide me through the routines, through the bland meals and the endless television. All while a fire raged within me. A quiet, terrifying rage that simmered beneath my placid exterior, waiting for its moment to erupt. I watched, I listened, and I waited. My moment would come. It had to. Every morning, I'd wake up in that unfamiliar bed, the scent of antiseptic and stale coffee filling my nostrils, and the first thought in my mind was always the same. He thinks he's won. He thinks he's buried me. He thinks I'm a forgotten relic. But he doesn't know his mother at all. He doesn't know the strength that pain can forge. One afternoon, a kind-faced nurse, a woman named Sarah with gentle, weary eyes, brought me the residential admission form to sign. She said it was just a formality. As she laid it on the table, my eyes, which Dennis believed were slipping, scanned the document with laser focus. My signature line was blank, of course, because I had never consented to any of this. But further up, next to medical consent and observation status, was a scrawled signature. My son, Dennis, and beneath it, a chilling, gut-wrenching claim. Patient is slipping mentally, experiencing frequent confusion spells. Confusion spells? The words blurred as a fresh wave of hurt washed over me. I remembered every detail of his childhood, every muddy hands, every scraped knees, every triumphant moment, every foolish teenage decision that had kept me up at night. I remembered the exact day he told me he loved me for the first time. His small arms wrapped tightly around my neck. I remembered the comforting scent of my kitchen, the intricate pattern on my favorite teacup, the familiar crack in the ceiling above my own bed. My memory was not just intact. It was a treasure trove of a life Dennis was trying to steal. He had forged it. He had lied. He had manufactured a narrative to put me away, to take my home, to steal my very identity. My heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs, but I kept my face impassive, my voice surprisingly steady. "Oh, this old thing," I murmured, pushing the form back to Sarah with a dismissive flick of my wrist. "I'll get to it later, dear. My glasses are a bit blurry today." She nodded sympathetically, completely oblivious to the war waging inside me. But the fire inside me was no longer simmering. It was roaring, a furious blaze that threatened to consume me. The moment Sarah left, I felt for the small, emergency flip phone I had hidden in the lining of my worn handbag. The one Dennis had dismissed as too old-fashioned and pointless in the age of smartphones. He never bothered to check it. He thought he knew everything. He thought I was helpless, a relic of a bygone era. That phone, clunky and outdated, was my lifeline, my silent weapon. With trembling fingers that felt strangely strong, I dialed the only number that mattered. Monica. My lawyer. A woman as sharp as a tack and as loyal as a bulldog, whose stern exterior hid a heart of gold. Her voice, when she answered, was crisp and professional, then softened with a hint of concern when she recognized mine. "Dorothy? Is everything all right? I haven't heard from you in a while." "No, Monica," I whispered, glancing nervously at the closed door, as if Dennis himself might materialize. "Everything is far from all right. Dennis, he's put me in a nursing home. He thinks I'm senile. He thinks he owns my house. He thinks I'm gone." The last part was a choked sob I couldn't quite suppress. The next few weeks were a blur of whispered phone calls, clandestine meetings with Monica in the nursing home's dreary visitors' lounge. A sterile room designed for superficial pleasantries, not legal warfare. I recounted every painful detail. The fall, Dennis's cruel words, the admission form with its damning lies, his immediate, casual occupation of my home. Monica listened, her expression growing sterner, her jaw tightening with each revelation. "He's banking on you being too frail, too confused to fight back, Dorothy," she said, her voice low, a promise of retribution in her tone. "He's underestimated you." That was the understatement of the century. Monica told me what we needed. I spent hours, sometimes late into the night when the nurses thought I was sleeping, painstakingly compiling lists. Account numbers, legal document locations, property deeds, investment portfolios. Everything Dennis thought I had forgotten. Everything he thought he could easily access and control. He had no idea I kept meticulous records, that I had always been the one to manage our finances, even when my dear husband was alive. He thought I was just an old woman who baked cookies. He was about to learn, in the most devastating way possible, just how wrong he was. We filed an emergency motion to revoke the forged power of attorney. The audacity of him, to sign my name, to claim medical consent. We also sued him for elder exploitation and misrepresentation of legal documents. Monica moved fast, a legal whirlwind. The most satisfying part, the one that made a genuine, albeit grim, smile touch my lips for the first time in weeks, was freezing the joint bank account he had been using to pay the mortgage on my house. The house he thought was his. The house he thought he had stolen. He was about to get a very rude awakening. I imagined his face, that entitled smirk wiped clean, replaced with shock, then disbelief, then pure, unadulterated panic. It was a delicious thought, a small dark victory in the silent war I was waging. I wanted him to feel just a fraction of the fear, the helplessness, the profound violation I had felt that day he called me a burden. I wanted him to understand that some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. A few days later, Monica arrived at the nursing home, a triumphant glint in her eyes that mirrored the one in my own heart. "It's done, Dorothy." The judge granted the motion. "You're free to leave." Free. The word tasted like sweet nectar on my tongue, pure and unadulterated. I hugged Monica tightly, a genuine, heartfelt hug, something I hadn't felt capable of giving since Dennis's brutal betrayal. I gathered the few belongings I had brought with me, the ones Dennis hadn't bothered to sort through, and walked out of that place with my head held high, my spirit unbroken. No longer a burden, no longer a prisoner. I was Dorothy, and I was back. But this was just the beginning. I hadn't moved back into my old house. Oh no. That was part of the plan, a crucial chess move. Instead, Monica had found me a beautiful private suite, quiet and comfortable, where I could continue to work on the next phase of my careful, deliberate revenge. Because it was revenge, pure and simple. Not petty but profound. A lesson he desperately needed to learn, etched into his very being. Monica and I sat across from each other in my new temporary living room. Two generals planning a complex campaign. The next step was a forced partition sale of the property. Dennis didn't legally own the entire house, not by a long shot. And I certainly hadn't consented to him living there. "He'll fight it, Dorothy," Monica warned. But her eyes held a spark of excitement, a shared thrill of the hunt. "He'll throw everything he has at us." "Let him," I said, a steely resolve in my voice that surprised even myself. It was the voice of a woman who had been pushed too far, who had found an inner strength she never knew existed. "He'll learn that some battles are unwinnable, especially when you're fighting a woman who has nothing left to lose, and everything to reclaim. He'll learn that a mother's love, once scorned, can become an unstoppable force." The paperwork was drawn up. The legal notices were prepared. And then one crisp autumn morning, a process server delivered a thick envelope to my old address, to the house Dennis now occupied, the house he thought was his. I wasn't there to see it, but I imagined it with vivid clarity. I imagined the knock on the door, the confusion on his face, the dawning horror as he read the contents. And I imagined Dennis realizing, with a sickening jolt, that his mother, the burden he had tried to bury, was very much alive, very much aware, and very much coming for him. What do you think happened when he opened that envelope? What do you think went through his mind as he realized his carefully constructed deception was unraveling, piece by agonizing piece, taking his entire world down with it? What would you feel if your past came back, not just to haunt you, but to dismantle everything you'd built on a foundation of lies? Before Dennis became the son who tried to erase me, he was just my boy. My sweet, curious, sometimes mischievous boy. His father, Michael, and I had him later in life, and he was everything to us. My husband, bless his soul, was a gentle giant, a man who built things with his hands and loved with his whole heart. We met at a local carnival. He was working the ring toss, and I was trying unsuccessfully to win a giant stuffed bear. He pretended to fix the rings so I could win, and that was it. We were inseparable. Our home, the one Dennis would later try to steal, was a sanctuary. It was filled with laughter, the smell of Michael's woodworking projects in the garage, and my baking wafting from the kitchen. We weren't rich, but we were rich in love and purpose, in the quiet joy of building a life together. When Dennis came along, he completed our world. I remember the day he was born, the impossibly tiny fingers gripping mine. The profound love that hit me like a tidal wave. He was a bright child, always asking questions, always sketching little dragons and spaceships. Michael spent hours with him, teaching him how to fix things, how to plant a garden, how to treat others with kindness. We always believed in a strong foundation. Honesty, hard work, and family above all else. Dennis excelled in school, charismatic and intelligent, always finding a way to charm his teachers and make friends. He had this easy smile, a dimple that would appear on his left cheek, and it could melt your heart. Who could have imagined that beneath that charming exterior, something cold and calculating was slowly forming? Who could have known that the boy who once drew me Mother's Day cards adorned with glitter and heartfelt messages would one day consider me a burden? Our life wasn't without its challenges, of course. Michael had a few health scares as he got older, and I became his primary caregiver. It was a role I embraced without question, tending to him with every ounce of love I had. Dennis, by then a young man, was often busy with his own life, college, then starting his career. He'd call, visit occasionally, but the hands-on care fell to me. I never complained. It was my husband, my partner. But I often wondered if Dennis, seeing the demands of caregiving, started to associate it with weakness, with an imposition. Was that where the seed of his eventual cruelty was planted? Did he look at his father's illness and then at me, burdened by care, and think, I don't want that for myself? I don't want that responsibility. It's a thought that still haunts me, a bitter pill to swallow. After Michael passed, the house felt empty, too quiet. Dennis was there for the funeral, of course, offering his condolences, his arm around me. He seemed genuinely sad, and for a while he called more often. He'd check in, ask if I needed anything. He even suggested getting me a cleaner or a meal delivery service, saying, Mom, you've done enough. It's time to take care of yourself. I appreciated the sentiment, truly. He married Temi, a vibrant, ambitious woman who at first seemed lovely. They had a son, Ken, my precious grandson, who became the new light in my life. Ken was everything Dennis once was, bright-eyed, full of wonder, and deeply affectionate. He loved coming to my house, listening to my stories, and helping me bake cookies. Those moments with Ken, they were pure joy, a reminder of the good in the world, a stark contrast to the shadows that would later gather. Dennis's career took off. He worked in finance, something about investments, and he and Temi bought a beautiful house in the suburbs. They started living a life of luxury, expensive cars, exotic vacations. I was proud of his success, truly I was. But with his rising status, I noticed a subtle shift. His calls became less frequent, more perfunctory. His visits grew shorter, often feeling rushed. He'd talk about his latest deals, his financial gains, but rarely about anything truly personal. It was as if our bond, once so deep, was becoming transactional. He started offering advice about my finances, suggesting I consolidate things, put him on my accounts for easier management, in case anything happened. Just practical, Mom, he'd say, with that charming smile. For your peace of mind. And because he was my son, because I trusted him implicitly, because I truly believed he had my best interests at heart, I agreed. I signed the papers. I gave him access. How could I have known that this act of trust, this gesture of motherly love, would become the very weapon he would later turn against me? The signs, in hindsight, were there, subtle whispers before the scream. A slight impatience in his voice when I called with a small problem. A dismissive wave when I brought up old memories. A growing distance in his eyes. He'd often bring Temi and Ken to visit. And while Ken would run to me with open arms, Dennis and Temi would sit stiffly, talking about their busy lives, almost as if my quiet, rooted existence was a quaint, slightly tiresome backdrop to their grand narrative. Temi, while polite, always had a calculating look in her eyes, a subtle judgment. It was as if they were observing me, not engaging with me. As if they were waiting. Waiting for what? I didn't know then. But I felt it, this growing chasm between us, a slow, creeping chill where warmth once resided. The house, my house, became a point of contention. It was paid off, a legacy from Michael and me, filled with memories. Dennis started suggesting I should sell it. "It's too big for you, Mom," he'd say. "Too much to maintain. You could move into a nice condo, be closer to us." But I loved my home. Every creak of the floorboards, every sunbeam that hit the antique clock, every rosebush in the garden. They were all extensions of my life, of Michael's life, of our family's history. It wasn't just bricks and mortar, it was my anchor. I politely declined, again and again. Each refusal was met with a tighter smile from Dennis, a harder glint in Temmie's eyes. I began to sense an unspoken pressure, a desire beneath their words. Did they want the house? For themselves? The thought was a fleeting, uncomfortable whisper in the back of my mind. I quickly dismissed it. He was my son. He wouldn't. Could he? My health had always been good, remarkably so for my age. A few aches and pains, yes, but nothing serious. That's why the fainting spell that morning was such a shock. Not just to me, but apparently to Dennis. It wasn't a sign of mental decline, not for a moment. It was a momentary physical lapse, probably from not eating enough breakfast or standing up too quickly. But in Dennis's eyes, it was a convenient excuse. The perfect justification for a plan he had clearly been meticulously crafting. Looking back, I can see it so clearly now. The way he looked at me on the floor, not with love, but with opportunity. The way he rushed me into that nursing home, not with care, but with cold, calculated efficiency. He had been preparing for this, for my decline. For the moment he could swoop in and take control. He had mistaken my love and trust for naivete, my quiet resilience for weakness. And he was about to pay a very, very heavy price for that monumental misjudgment. Because what happens when you underestimate the quiet woman? The one you think is too old and too slow to fight back. You unleash a storm you never saw coming. What do you think you would have done if you saw the subtle signs, the shifting priorities, the growing distance in your own child's eyes? Would you have been as blind with love as I was? The antiseptic smell of the nursing home clung to everything. A suffocating blanket that seemed to snuff out any hope of my former life. Days blurred into weeks. The cheerful, forced smiles of the staff, the bland meals served at precise times, the endless, mind-numbing television shows in the common room. It was all designed to lull me into submission, to make me forget who I was. But I wasn't forgetting. Oh no. I was remembering every single slight, every dismissive glance, every patronizing word Dennis had ever uttered. The fire within me, sparked by betrayal, was now fueled by this forced confinement, growing hotter, fiercer. He thought he had extinguished me, but he had only forged me into something harder, something unbreakable. This place, meant to be my quiet ending, was instead becoming the crucible of my defiance. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I wasn't just grieving for my lost freedom. I was strategizing. Every conversation with a nurse, every overheard snippet of gossip, every form I was asked to sign. I processed it all. I was an observer, a silent sentinel, gathering intelligence in my own personal war zone. The other residents, kind souls mostly, talked about their families, their memories, their quiet acceptance of their circumstances. But I couldn't accept. Not when my circumstances had been manufactured, based on a lie. I watched the staff, noting who was compassionate, who was merely going through the motions. Sarah, the nurse who had shown me the admission form, was one of the good ones. Her kindness felt genuine, her concern unfeigned. She was an ally I didn't know I needed, but instinctively recognized. The turning point, the moment my quiet strategy shifted into active engagement, came during one of my therapy sessions. It was with a young, earnest therapist named Mark, who had a habit of asking me if I knew what day it was, or who the current president was. Childish questions, designed to assess my supposed mental slippage. I played the part of the slightly confused but cooperative, elderly woman. "Oh dear, is it Tuesday already?" I'd muse, with a little laugh. Time just flies when you're having fun. One afternoon, Mark was particularly persistent, trying to get me to recall a recent event that had been distorted in the facility's daily newsletter. I deliberately got some details wrong, just enough to seem vague, but then in a moment of frustration he sighed and said, "It's just, your son seemed so concerned about your confusion spells." He painted a very vivid picture for the admissions team. That phrase, painted a very vivid picture. ignited something inside me. It wasn't just a lie. It was a deliberate, artistic construction of a false reality. He hadn't just exaggerated. He had fabricated my decline piece by piece. The injustice of it burned through my carefully constructed facade. That's when it hit me. My silence, my playing along, was inadvertently validating his lies. I needed to move. I needed to fight back. "Mark," I said, my voice clearer than he'd ever heard it. "My son? Dennis. He's a very convincing storyteller, isn't he?" Mark looked surprised, then a flicker of understanding crossed his face. He quickly recovered, reverting to his professional demeanor, but I saw it. A chink in the armor of their collective belief in Dennis's narrative. I knew then that some people, like Mark, might be swayed if presented with the truth. Others, those who bought Dennis's story hook, line, and sinker, would be harder to convince. This wasn't just about my freedom, it was about reclaiming my truth. The following day, I put my plan into action. I had been carrying that emergency flip phone in my handbag, a relic from a simpler time. Dennis thought it was pointless, a discarded piece of technology. He never suspected it would be my key to freedom. During my daily walk in the small, manicured garden, a pathetic rectangle of green meant to simulate nature, I found a secluded bench. My heart pounded, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. This was it. This was the moment I stopped being the burden and started being Dorothy again. With trembling fingers, I retrieved the phone. The small screen glowed to life, a beacon of defiance. I dialed Monica's number, my lawyer. The one person I knew I could trust implicitly. The one person who saw me Dorothy, not patient 2B, or Dennis' confused mother. Monica answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional. "Dorothy, is everything all right?" "No, Monica," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion, but laced with a newfound resolve. "Everything is far from all right. Dennis, he's put me in a nursing home. He forged documents. He said I was a burden." The words tumbled out, raw and painful, but liberating. I told her everything. The fall, his cruel words, the admission form with his signature, the medical consent based on lies, the confusion spells he had invented. I even told her about Mark's accidental revelation. Monica listened patiently, her silence a reassuring presence on the other end of the line. When I finished, there was a pause, and then her voice sharper now colder. "Dorothy, this is serious. Elder exploitation, misrepresentation of legal documents. He's committed fraud." The legal terms, harsh and definitive, were like a balm to my wounded spirit. Someone understood. Someone believed me. Monica wasted no time. She needed details, proof, anything I could recall. This was where my meticulous nature, the very thing Dennis probably found boring or old-fashioned, became my salvation. All those years, I had kept every bank statement, every deed, every legal document in a fireproof safe in my closet. I had digital copies too, backed up on a small, encrypted USB drive I always carried with me just in case. Dennis had no idea. He thought I was technologically illiterate. He thought I had simply handed over control without question. How wrong he was. In secret, under the cover of night, using the small, ancient laptop I kept hidden in my wardrobe, I began to compile the information for Monica. Account numbers, investment details, the exact wording of Michael's will, the specifics of the joint bank account Dennis had so casually managed for me. Every number, every date, every clause became a bullet in my arsenal. I was building my case, piece by painful piece, against my own son. The weight of the betrayal was crushing, but the act of fighting back, of actively reclaiming my agency, was exhilarating. Each whispered conversation with Monica, each piece of evidence I gathered, felt like a small victory. I wasn't just planning my escape. I was planning his downfall. He wanted to erase me? I would show him what it truly meant to be erased. He wanted my house? He would learn that some things are far more precious than mere property. He wanted to bury me? I would rise from the ashes and ensure he watched me thrive. Monica moved swiftly. She filed an emergency motion to revoke the forged power of attorney, the very document he used to steal my consent. And then the delicious twist, the one that made my heart sing with a grim satisfaction. She froze the joint bank account. The one he was using to pay the mortgage on my house. The house he thought was his for the taking. I imagined the notification, the sudden, inexplicable halt to his financial control. The confusion, then the dawning horror. The smug look on his face, replaced by pure, unadulterated panic. He thought he had me cornered, helpless. He thought I was just an old woman, easy to dismiss. But I was Dorothy, and I was just getting started. If you think what Dennis did was wrong, comment. Everyone deserves respect below. A few days later, Monica arrived at the nursing home. Her face radiating a quiet triumph. It's done, Dorothy. The judge granted the motion. You're free to leave. Free. The word echoed in the sterile halls, a defiant shout against the quiet acceptance of this place. I gathered the few belongings I had brought with me, the ones Dennis hadn't bothered to sort through, and walked out of that place with my head held high, my spirit unbowed. No longer a burden, no longer a prisoner. I was Dorothy and I was back. But this was just the beginning. I hadn't moved back into my old house. Oh no. That was part of a much larger, more poetic plan. Instead, Monica had found me a beautiful private suite, quiet and comfortable, where I could continue to work on the next phase of my careful, deliberate retribution. Because it was retribution, pure and simple. Not petty but profound. A lesson he desperately needed to learn, etched into his very being. What else could he lose? What else did I have hidden up my sleeve that he knew nothing about? He thought he was untouchable, but his world was about to crumble, brick by agonizing brick, and he wouldn't even see it coming until it was too late. The moment I walked out of that nursing home, the fresh air hit me like a revelation. It wasn't just the physical freedom. It was the psychological release from that suffocating environment, from the forced smiles and the condescending tones. I was out. But the fight, the real fight, had only just begun. Dennis had delivered a gut punch, and now it was my turn to return the favor, with interest. Monica drove me to the private suite she had arranged, a beautiful, bright apartment overlooking a small park. It was a stark contrast to the bland, clinical room I had been confined to. This was a place for healing, for planning, for reclaiming my sense of self. It felt like a fresh start, a new chapter in a book I thought was already written, waiting for me to pen its most powerful pages. The quiet hum of my new surroundings, the gentle breeze through the open window. It all felt like a balm to my raw, aching soul. The immediate aftermath of my release was a whirlwind of legal maneuvering. A complex dance I was learning to lead. Monica was relentless, a force of nature in her tailored suits. She was not only my lawyer but in those dark days, she became my lifeline, my confidant, a steadfast rock in the turbulent sea of my betrayal. We spent hours going over every detail, every piece of paper, building an airtight case against Dennis. The elder exploitation charges were particularly damning. He hadn't just put me in a nursing home. He had used deception and coercion to gain control of my assets. The forged power of attorney was the smoking gun, undeniable proof of his malicious intent. A betrayal so stark it took my breath away each time I thought of it. Every time we uncovered a new layer of his deception, a fresh wave of hurt would wash over me, quickly followed by a renewed surge of determination. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had tried to obliterate me, to make me cease to exist in my own life, in my own home. That was unforgivable, a wound that festered and demanded justice. The house, my house, the very heart of my memories, the place Michael and I had built our lives, brick by cherished brick. That was the immediate battleground, the prize Dennis had so brazenly tried to snatch. He was still living there, oblivious to the storm gathering around him, undoubtedly enjoying the illusion of his ill-gotten gains. Monica had secured an injunction, preventing him from selling or refinancing the property, a crucial first step. But the next, far more aggressive move, was to force a partition sale. This was a complex legal process, but in simple terms, it meant that since I still legally owned half of the house, and he didn't have my consent to live there, we could petition the court to force the sale of the entire property and divide the proceeds. It was a bold move, a direct assault on his perceived victory, on his stolen peace. And it was designed to hit him where it hurt the most, his sense of ownership, his profound entitlement. I could almost taste his impending shock. News travels fast, even in the quiet, often gossipy world of legal circles. I kept a low profile in my new sanctuary, but Monica, with her vast network, started to hear whispers, vague rumors swirling around Dennis like a gathering storm cloud. Apparently, he was becoming increasingly agitated, frustrated by the sudden, inexplicable lack of access to my frozen funds. He couldn't understand why the joint account, which he had treated as his personal piggy bank, was suddenly inaccessible. He must have been making up excuses to Temmie, fabricating stories about bank errors or administrative delays. Anything to avoid admitting the truth. He couldn't possibly admit that his supposedly senile mother had outsmarted him, could he? The thought brought a grim satisfaction, a flicker of dark amusement in my heart. I imagined him, pacing in my living room, yelling into his phone, his carefully constructed world starting to crack at the seams, the foundations of his deceit beginning to give way. One day, Monica called me with an interesting piece of information, a detail that painted an even clearer picture of Dennis's desperation. "Dorothy," she said, her voice barely concealing her amusement. "Dennis has been trying to take out a new loan against the house. He's been denied. Multiple times." My heart gave a triumphant flutter, a surge of vindication. "Denied?" I echoed, almost breathless. "Yes," she confirmed, her tone sharp with professional satisfaction. "The injunction we secured, combined with the charges of elder exploitation and fraud that are now public record, means no reputable bank will touch that property with a 10-foot pole. It's too high a risk. He's a pariah in the lending world now, Dorothy." This was more than just a legal victory, it was a profound psychological blow. He was trapped. The house he thought he had so cleverly acquired, the very symbol of his perceived success, was now a financial dead end, a monument to his own greed and deception. This was the immediate aftermath I wanted for him. Confusion, frustration, and the slow, agonizing realization that his plans were crumbling, that his grand scheme was dissolving into dust around him. He had celebrated my perceived defeat. Now it was his turn to grapple with a future he hadn't anticipated, a future where his stolen gains were turning to ashes in his hands. Monica and I also discovered a few red herrings in the early stages of our deeper investigation. There were whispers from his former colleagues, vague murmurs Monica's contacts picked up, that Dennis had actually been struggling financially for a while, that his lavish lifestyle, the expensive cars, the exotic vacations Temmie posted about endlessly on social media, was more facade than reality. At one point, we considered that his desperation might be the sole motivator, rather than pure, cold malice. Was he genuinely in trouble, drowning in debt, and saw my house, my assets, as his only viable way out? Was this a desperate act born of fear, or a cold, calculated one fueled by inherent greed? This thought, however fleeting, almost made me pause. Could I feel sympathy for him? For the son who abandoned me, betrayed me, and tried to erase me? The answer, a bitter truth, was a resounding no. His financial woes, if they truly existed, did not, and could not, excuse his cruelty, his blatant disregard for my well-being, his audacious attempt to strip me of my dignity and my home. Desperation might explain why someone commits a crime, but it doesn't absolve them of the moral responsibility, especially when that crime is against their own mother, the woman who gave them everything. The ethical lines he crossed were too deep, too fundamental to be excused by mere financial strain. I found myself piecing together the truth alongside Monica, feeling like a seasoned detective in my own devastating story. We reviewed old bank statements, tax documents, investment portfolios, anything that could shed light on Dennis's true financial state, not the glossy version he presented to the world. It revealed a disturbing pattern of increasing debt, of high-risk investments that had gone sour, of a lifestyle that far outstripped his actual, sustainable income. It seems he wasn't just managing my money. He was eyeing it as a desperate solution to his own burgeoning, self-inflicted problems. The picture that emerged wasn't just of a greedy son, but a reckless, desperate one, though his desperation did not, in my eyes, diminish his villainy. He believed he was entitled to my wealth, to my stability, to my home, simply because he was my son. He saw me not as a mother, but as a resource to be tapped, then ruthlessly discarded. This was not the son I raised. This was a stranger wearing his face, a parasite in my life. The realization was a chilling one, a cold dread that settled deep in my bones. It wasn't just about inheriting the house eventually, after I was gone. It was about immediate financial relief, about plugging the gaping holes in his extravagant life. He didn't want to wait for nature to take its course. He wanted to force its course, to accelerate my demise, financially and personally. The confusion spells were a convenient cover, a perfectly crafted smoke screen to mask his true, self-serving intentions. He had probably been building this insidious narrative for months, subtly hinting to others that I was slipping, planting seeds of doubt, priming the ground for his eventual takeover. It made the betrayal even deeper, even more calculated, more insidious. He had planned this, meticulously and coldly. He wanted me out of the way, and my house, my assets, were merely the spoils of war, to be plundered for his own benefit. As I sat in my new, quiet suite, surrounded by boxes I was slowly unpacking, each item a tangible link to the life he tried to erase, I often looked out at the park. Children played, their innocent laughter echoing faintly. Couples walked hand in hand, their lives seemingly untouched by such dark betrayals. Life went on, oblivious to the storm raging inside me, and I realized then that Dennis had fundamentally misunderstood one crucial thing. He thought he was taking my life away, but he was actually just clearing the path for a new one, a stronger one, a more determined one. He thought he was putting me in a cage, but he was merely giving me time to sharpen my claws, to plan my counterattack. The forced partition sale was approved by the court. The paperwork was ready. This was the next step, the turning point from quiet resistance to overt confrontation. It was no longer about whispering. It was about shouting my truth from the rooftops. It was about making sure Dennis, and anyone else who believed his lies, would hear my voice loud and clear. He was about to be served with the legal documents that would shatter his illusion of control, dismantle his stolen empire, and force him to face the very public consequences of his actions. I wondered what he would say when he finally saw them. What excuse would he conjure when the truth was staring him directly in the face, in black and white, legally binding and utterly inescapable? What would you feel if the comfortable life you built on deceit suddenly had its foundation shaken by a vengeful truth, leaving you exposed and vulnerable for the world to see? The day the partition sale papers were served was a day I had anticipated with a mix of dread and fierce satisfaction. I wasn't there, of course. Monica insisted I remain at my quiet suite, letting the legal process unfold. But I imagined it. Oh, how I imagined it. I envisioned the process server, a neutral figure of legal authority, walking up the familiar path to my front door, the very door Dennis had so arrogantly claimed as his own. I pictured him knocking, the sound echoing through the house, disrupting the false peace Dennis and Temmie had created. Then Dennis opening the door, perhaps with that impatient, slightly condescending air he had adopted for anyone he deemed beneath him. And then the moment of impact. The thick envelope, emblazoned with the court's seal, handed over. The sudden confusion on his face, quickly turning to disbelief, then a sickening, dawning horror as he read the words. Petition for partition sale. And then another document, detailing the charges. Elder exploitation. Misrepresentation of legal documents. I imagined the blood draining from his face, leaving him ghost white, his carefully constructed facade shattering in an instant. I imagined Temmie, my daughter-in-law, standing behind him, her eyes widening in shock, her carefully manicured world beginning to crumble alongside his. Monica called me later that afternoon, her voice bubbling with a suppressed glee. "Dorothy," she said, "the papers were served. It sounds like it was quite the scene." She described the process server's account. A woman's scream, unmistakable as Temmie's, followed by Dennis slamming the door with such force it rattled the windows. A small, cruel smile touched my lips. Good. Let them scream. Let them feel the shock, the anger, the fear I had lived with for weeks. This was just the beginning of their reckoning. The days that followed were tense. I knew Dennis would fight. He wouldn't simply roll over and accept defeat. He was too proud, too arrogant, and too deeply invested in his stolen life. He hired his own lawyers, of course expensive ones, no doubt draining whatever remaining funds he had. But Monica was ready. We had an airtight case. The forged power of attorney, the documented evidence of his financial maneuvering, the clear timeline of his actions against me. It all painted a picture of calculated betrayal. His lawyers tried to argue that I was indeed mentally incompetent, that my claims were the result of age-related confusion. But Monica countered with my medical records, my perfect cognitive assessments from before his intervention, and statements from independent doctors who found me perfectly sound of mind. The judge saw through his desperate attempts. The real emotional climax, the moment that felt incredibly raw and real, came when Monica informed me that Temmie had left Dennis. Just like that. The carefully cultivated image of their perfect, affluent life had cracked under the pressure of Dennis's exposure and impending ruin. Temmie, the woman who had stood by Dennis, subtly judging my slowness, my burden, had abandoned him the moment his financial well ran dry. She wasn't just leaving. She was taking their carefully constructed illusion of wealth and status with her. Monica explained that Temmie had likely seen the writing on the wall. The frozen accounts, the denied loans, the very public legal battle, and the undeniable truth of Dennis's lies. She wasn't interested in being married to a man facing elder exploitation charges and losing his home. Her loyalty, it turned out, was purely transactional. When Monica told me, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was a flicker of sadness for the dissolution of their family, for the pain it would cause Ken. But that sadness was quickly overshadowed by a stark, undeniable truth. Temmie had been an enabler, a silent accomplice in Dennis's scheme. She had benefited from his stolen gains, from his plan to erase me. And now, she was feeling the sting of his downfall, the very consequences of his actions. It was a harsh justice, perhaps, but a just one nonetheless. She had chosen to stand by him when he tried to bury me alive. Now she was suffering the fallout of his choices. This was the revelation. This was the first major twist that changed everything, demonstrating the domino effect of Dennis's cruelty. His actions hadn't just hurt me. They were now dismantling his own life, piece by painful piece. His wife, the woman he built his lavish lifestyle with, had walked away. His carefully curated image, his social standing, his financial stability, all crumbling. He had prioritized greed over family, and now his family was disintegrating before his eyes. It was a crushing blow, a brutal mirror reflecting his own treachery back at him. I imagine his loneliness in that big, empty house, now a monument to his failure. I wonder if, in those quiet moments, he ever thought about me, about the mother he cast aside. 2 months later, the calls started. Unidentified numbers appearing on my phone. I didn't answer them, following Monica's advice. But a part of me knew. It was Dennis. He was calling. Desperate. Monica's investigation had confirmed my suspicions about his dire financial situation. The partition sale was nearing, and with no access to funds, no other properties, and his wife gone, he was truly facing ruin. He was likely losing everything. And now he was calling his mother. The mother he had called a burden. The mother he had tried to erase. The mother he had sent to a nursing home. The irony was a bitter, yet satisfying, taste in my mouth. He needed me. The thought filled me with a quiet strength. Finally, one evening I picked up. His voice was different. Gone was the arrogant assurance, the dismissive tone. It was strained, almost hoarse, laced with a desperation I had never heard before. "Mom? Please, Mom, it's me. Dennis." My heart hammered, a mix of old wounds and new resolve. I let him speak. He pleaded, he begged, he tried to justify his actions, blaming stress, financial pressure, a momentary lapse in judgment. He even tried to turn it around, suggesting I had misunderstood, that he was only trying to help. But I wasn't the confused, senile old woman he had imagined. I was Dorothy, clear-eyed and unyielding. "You thought you could bury me, Dennis," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor in my hands. "You thought you could erase me. You treated me as if I were already dead." My words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken pain, with years of love and trust that he had trampled. "And now," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "you're learning what that feels like." I hung up. I didn't wait for his response. There was nothing more to say. The conversation was over. The loop of his initial betrayal was closed. But a new, more painful one had just begun for him. He had planted seeds of sorrow, and now he was harvesting a bitter crop. Have you ever felt a betrayal this deep? Comment below with how you would even begin to cope. I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights, a profound sense of closure settling over me. He had felt the sting of loss, of abandonment, of desperation. He had felt what it was like to be alone. And this was just the beginning. The house, my house, would soon be sold, and with it, his last foothold on the life he had stolen from me. He thought he could walk away from his actions, that his mother would simply fade into oblivion. He was wrong. And the most shocking twist, the one he hadn't anticipated, the one that would truly make him question everything, was still to come. He had no idea how close I still intended to be, how close I would be. His punishment was far from over. The petition sale moved forward with the cold, unyielding momentum of the legal system. Dennis fought it, of course, throwing every last penny he had at his legal team, desperately trying to cling to the house he had so brazenly claimed. But Monica had built an unassailable case. The judge, having witnessed his contortions and heard the damning evidence of his forgery and exploitation, was unmoved. The court ordered the sale of the property. My home, the place where Michael and I had raised our son, where we had shared countless joys and weathered silent sorrows, was now to be sold off to the highest bidder. It was a bittersweet victory, the loss of the physical space tinged with the triumph of justice. I didn't attend the auction. I couldn't bear to see strangers picking through the remnants of my past, valuing it in dollars and cents. Monica handled everything, ensuring that my interests were protected, that the proceeds were divided fairly. The house sold quickly, fetching a good price. And with the sale, Dennis's last lifeline was severed. He was out, evicted from the home he thought was his, now stripped of its false security. I imagined him watching the sold sign go up, the reality of his ruin finally sinking in. The furniture he had acquired, the upgrades he had made to my home, all gone, dispersed. His life, so recently opulent, was now utterly bereft of the physical symbols he cherished. But the final twist wasn't about the sale itself. It was about what I did next. Something nobody, least of all Dennis, saw coming. Something that reframed the entire story, making him question everything he thought he knew about me, about consequence, and about the inescapable nature of his own actions. With the money from the sale of my house, I didn't move far. Oh no. I didn't retreat to some distant, anonymous place, vanishing as he had intended. Instead, I bought the house right next door. Let that sink in. The house right next door to the one Dennis had just lost. I remember Monica's face when I told her my plan. Her eyes widened. Then a slow smile spread across her face, a look of pure, unadulterated awe. "Dorothy," she breathed, "you are magnificent." It wasn't just about owning a new home. It was a carefully orchestrated act of poetic justice, a living, breathing testament to his failure, displayed daily for him to witness. Dennis had been forced to leave my old house, the one he thought was his, because he couldn't pay the mortgage after I froze his account, after the petition sale went through. He was financially ruined, his credit destroyed, his wife gone. He had nowhere to go, no grand estate to retreat to. For a short time, he had to crash with friends, humiliated and stripped bare. Then one day I saw him. He was back, driving a beat-up car, pulling up to what used to be my house, but was now simply the house next door to mine. He was there to collect some final belongings, perhaps, or just to stand and stare at the wreckage of his ambition. And there I was, sitting on my new porch, in my new home, sipping tea, watching him. The shock on his face was monumental. It was more than just surprise. It was utter, soul-crushing disbelief. His jaw dropped. His eyes, hollowed by weeks of stress and defeat, darted from my new house to his old house, then back to me. A ghost returned from the grave he had dug. He looked like he'd seen an apparition, like his carefully buried past had risen up, not just to haunt him, but to move and right beside him. He couldn't speak. He couldn't even form a coherent thought, judging by the utter blankness of his expression, swiftly followed by a wave of pure, incandescent rage that flashed across his features. He had tried to erase me, to make me disappear. He had treated me as if I were already dead, irrelevant, a relic of the past to be swept aside. But here I was, not just alive, but thriving. Not just back, but literally next door, a constant, unavoidable reminder of his monumental failure. Every morning he woke up, every evening he returned. He would be forced to look at my new home, knowing it was bought with the money from the house he had tried to steal from me. He would be forced to look at me, the mother he had called a burden, the woman he had underestimated, now sitting comfortably on her porch, a quiet, smiling sentinel of his shattered dreams. This wasn't just physical proximity, it was emotional proximity, a constant, agonizing presence that he could never escape. This was the final twist, the emotional gut punch nobody saw coming. It reframed the entire story, not just as a tale of a son's betrayal and a mother's fight for justice, but as a chilling, inescapable saga of consequence. He had tried to bury me, and in doing so, he had unwittingly ensured that my return would be not just triumphant, but eternally present in his shattered life. It was a level of poetic justice so profound, so utterly devastating, that it made his previous attempts at betrayal seem almost petty by comparison. I had not just won the legal battle, I had won the psychological war. I had taken back my life, and in doing so, ensured that he would forever live with the visual, daily manifestation of his own destruction. What do you do when the person you wronged, the person you tried to erase, becomes your next-door neighbor, a constant, living shadow of your greatest failure? What does it feel like to have your ultimate regret become the view from your window, every single day? Life, funny thing, has a way of balancing the scales. Dennis, my son, who thought he could simply cast me aside, found himself utterly alone. His wife, Temi, had abandoned him, taking with her the last vestiges of his respectable facade. His grand plans to climb the financial ladder using my assets had not only failed but had spectacularly backfired, leaving him with nothing but a mountain of debt and a destroyed reputation. He was forced to leave the neighborhood entirely, unable to afford even a small apartment in the area he once lorded over. I heard he moved far away, trying to escape the shadow of his own making, to a place where no one knew his name or the spectacular ruin he had created for himself. He tried to rebuild, I'm sure, but a man who loses his home, his family, and his integrity often finds that some foundations, once shattered, can never be truly repaired. As for me, I never moved back into my old house. That chapter was closed. Instead, my new home, the one right next door, became my sanctuary, a beacon of resilience and defiance. From my porch, I watched the new family move into my old house, bringing with them laughter and fresh beginnings, a stark contrast to the emptiness Dennis had left behind. It was a strange feeling, seeing new faces in the windows that once held my reflection, but it wasn't painful. It was liberating. It was proof that life moves on, that new stories can be built even from the ashes of betrayal. That house, once a symbol of my past, was now just a house, and my new one was a symbol of my future. The money from the sale of my house, after Monica's fees and the purchase of my new home, was substantial. I wasn't just financially secure. I was independent in a way I hadn't been since Michael passed. I thought long and hard about what to do with it. My first priority was to ensure that no other elderly woman would suffer the fate I almost did. I remembered the vulnerability, the feeling of powerlessness, and I knew I had to act. So, I established the Mayfield Legacy Grant. It's a foundation dedicated to providing legal aid and support for other exploited elderly women, offering them the resources and the voice they desperately need to fight back against those who would seek to prey on them. Every time a woman is helped, every time justice is served, I feel a quiet thrill, a profound sense of purpose. It's my legacy, a testament to turning pain into power, to transforming a personal betrayal into a public good. But there was another heart that needed mending, another life that needed nurturing. My grandson, Ken. He had been caught in the crossfire of his parents' implosion and Dennis's spectacular downfall. Temi had taken him when she left, but her life too had become unstable. He was adrift, confused, and deeply hurt by the sudden fracturing of his family. I missed him desperately, his bright eyes, his innocent questions, his infectious laugh. After a few months, with Monica's help, I contacted Temi. We spoke, not as adversaries, but as two women who, in different ways, had been touched by Dennis's destructive path. Temi admitted she was struggling, unable to provide the stable home Ken needed. And so he came to live with me. Ken moved into my new house, the one next door, and with him, a profound sense of peace finally settled in my heart. His presence filled the rooms with light and laughter again. We spent hours baking cookies, just like old times, but now with a deeper appreciation for each moment. We explored the new neighborhood, planted a small garden, and simply enjoyed each other's company. He brought with him a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder that love, true love, can heal even the deepest wounds. Seeing him thrive, seeing his confidence return, was more gratifying than any legal victory. He was a piece of Dennis, yes, but he was also a piece of me, and of Michael, and he represented hope, a future untainted by the bitterness of the past. One quiet evening, as Ken slept soundly in his room, I sat on my new porch, looking at the familiar silhouette of my old house now owned by a new family. I thought of Dennis. I thought of the path he had chosen, the son who had tried to bury his mother. He had aimed for my vulnerability, for my assumed helplessness, and instead he had forged my strength. He had tried to erase me, and I had returned, not just alive but thriving, and literally next door, a constant reminder of his ruin. The poetic justice of it all still felt sharp, a cold satisfaction. He was forced to sell the very house he couldn't pay the mortgage on, the house he coveted. And now I lived right next door, a daily, inescapable symbol of his epic failure. The lesson was brutal, but clear. You reap what you sow. He had sown greed, deceit, and abandonment, and he had reaped loneliness, financial ruin, and the loss of his family. I had sown resilience, integrity, and a fierce love for my grandson, and I had reaped peace, purpose, and a renewed family. My story teaches us about the corrosive nature of betrayal, how it can utterly dismantle lives, not just for the victim, but for the perpetrator. It teaches us about the enduring strength of the human spirit, how even in the darkest moments, hope and justice can prevail. And it teaches us that love, the purest form of human connection, is the most powerful force for healing and rebuilding, a beacon against the darkness of treachery. What does it truly mean to find peace after such profound suffering? Is it forgiveness? Or is it simply moving forward, knowing that justice has been served in its own brutal way? What do you think becomes of a man like Dennis, consumed by his own greed, haunted by the specter of his past next door? Can he ever truly escape the consequences of his actions, or is he forever bound by the choices he made that day in my kitchen? The answer, I believe, lies in the quiet torment of his own conscience, a burden far heavier than any he tried to place on me. And so here I sit on my porch, my new porch, the afternoon sun warming my face. Ken is inside, probably lost in a book, or maybe building one of his intricate Lego castles. The scent of honeysuckle drifts through the air, and a gentle breeze rustles the leaves of the old mango tree that shades my yard. Peace. It's a word I hadn't truly understood the depth of until recently. A quiet, profound peace that settled over me after the storm. Dennis is gone, vanished from the neighborhood, a ghost of a memory that occasionally floats to the surface, but no longer consumes me. His grand scheme, his attempt to erase me, ultimately ended with him erasing himself from his own life, from his own family. He learned, in the harshest possible way, that some burdens you create for others eventually become the heaviest ones you carry yourself. I often think about the day he got the petition sale papers, the day Temmie screamed, the day his world began to unravel. I remember his voice on the phone, desperate and broken, trying to rationalize his betrayal. "You thought you could bury me, Dennis," I had told him, and those words still resonate. He tried to turn me into a statistic, a forgotten elderly woman. But I refused. I fought. And I won, not with anger, not with hatred, but with a quiet, unwavering resolve to reclaim my life and, more importantly, to protect the innocent. Ken's laughter from inside is a constant reminder of that victory. He's thriving here, finally finding stability and unconditional love. We talk about everything, about his day at school, about his dreams, about the strange ways families can sometimes break apart and then, miraculously, mend in new forms. I've made sure his future is secure, placing all the rest of my estate money into a trust for him. It's a legacy of love, not of exploitation. It's a message that hope and connection can always prevail. even when faced with the darkest betrayals. I want him to know that even when things seem impossible, there's always a way to stand up for what's right, to find your strength, and to build something beautiful out of the ashes of hardship. The Mayfield Legacy Grant is flourishing. Monica sends me updates, stories of women who, like me, were deemed burdens or confused, now fighting back with the support they deserve. Knowing that my pain has helped carve a path for others, that my story has given them courage, is perhaps the most fulfilling aspect of this entire journey. It reminds me that even when you face the worst of human nature, you can choose to respond with compassion, with purpose, and with a determination to make the world a little less harsh for those who come after you. It's a testament to the idea that love, even when wounded, can grow into something powerful and protective. This whole experience has reshaped my understanding of family, of loyalty, and of what truly matters. It taught me that sometimes the ones who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. But it also taught me that strength can come from unexpected places, from quiet corners, from the unwavering support of a loyal friend like Monica. It taught me that reclaiming your dignity is a battle worth fighting, every single time. And that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or property deeds, but in the love you share, the peace you cultivate, and the positive impact you have on others. Dennis might have tried to steal my material possessions, but he could never steal my spirit, my memories, or the profound love I hold for my true family. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? If your own child had betrayed you in the most intimate way, tried to steal your life and your dignity, would you have fought back? Would you have found the strength to rebuild, not just for yourself, but for the future of someone you love? Let me know in the comments below. This story, my story, is a testament to resilience, to the quiet power of a mother scorned, and to the unwavering belief that justice, in its own time, will always prevail. And if you think my story was shocking, wait until you hear the next one. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in honesty and compassion. Only people who support lies and manipulation would refuse to join us on this journey of truth and resilience. Let's build a community that stands for integrity, for family, and for the unwavering power of the human spirit. Always remember, at Virtuous Stories, we love you.